So hopefully you can kind of see the screen there, some kind of conversation around mission and digitality that I want to kind of really talk about. What I really want to kind of talk about is where we go with mission at the moment, and the way in which mission is actually focused upon this process of evangelization. Vincent Donovan, one of the kind of great missiologists, once said, evangelism is a process of bringing the gospel to people where they are, not where you'd like them to be. When the gospel reaches a people where they are, their response to the gospel is the church in a new place. That's really interesting that we lead the gospel, we lead mission where people are. And I want to kind of link what we're doing at the moment with digital mission, or mission in the digital age, with what Donovan's saying there when he went to the Maasai in the 1960s. And basically, he said, you've got to go to that culture. You've got to embed yourself within that culture in order to be useful. So when Daniel started talking about how do we sing the Lord's song in a strange land, how then do we preach the Lord's word in a digital world? And we're going to come back to Daniel towards the end of what I've got to say. So we live in a digital world. We live in a world which is everything is going digital, a kind of globalized culture. And you can see here everything that happens in a minute online, and you can kind of see the vast amounts of stuff that's going on. 2 million Snapchats, 12 million people send an iMessage, Google 5.7 million searches. Now this is every single minute on the internet, vast amounts of stuff happening all over the world. And this is a global concept. Notice the internet's gone off on Iran at the moment because of what the government are up to there. But a globalized context that it kind of happens all over the world. The possibility that 5 billion people through the internet were able to watch the service on Monday of the Queen's funeral. And a number of sociologists are now kind of coming around and saying, hey, hold on a minute, because we once thought the kind of mediated life or digital life was something just separate from what we're talking about. But Coogee and Hepp here in this book, Mediated Construction of Reality, begin to say, actually, this is actually life. This is this constant inclusion of the digital has to be part and parcel of how we build a world these days. And a couple of examples of that, Christine Hines' 2015 book, Ethnography for the Internet, where she talks about the way in which digital is now embedded, embodied, and everyday. These shiny devices that we have, we like them so much, but they are so embedded in our lives. And it's not just that they're tools for us to contact other people, they also contact us. People phone us through this, but also the phone directs our lives more and more through notifications and through pop-ups and so on. So embedded, embodied, and everyday. At the same time, a group of UCL anthropologists did a big global report upon the global smartphone. You can download that through this QR code here. But the global smartphone report talks about how the smartphone has become everything. Their key finding is that the global smartphone is now people's home. Get that? The smartphone is now people's home. This is where all their contacts are. This is where their social engagement is. This is where they call for food. This is everything. So the smartphone becomes something beyond just being a digital device. It becomes a kind of social connectivity for people. So the digital culture is the be-all and end-all for everybody. Now, we found that in the lockdown as well, in the pandemic and so on, that are we coming out of, whatever it might be. And so there's this great chart about where Stephen Garner wrote in New Zealand about kind of how we look back at what happened during the lockdown, the shift from a pandemic closure to a digital opening, when through digital connectivity, we suddenly found the opportunity to engage with the church through technology. There's a joke kind of cartoon of the devil saying, with one virus, I've closed down all your churches, and God saying, no, I've opened a branch in everybody's house. So we had that kind of sense of new opportunities, a kind of rhythm of life mode that we moved into about discipleship and prayer and services and discipleship. Pragmatism, kind of trying to shift over to digital because it made it work. But then also that led to creativity, that sense that so we could do so much through online engagement, and could we do even more perhaps through what we could do? Where were we going? Were we allowing people to find church, and were they engaging with what we were doing? Of course, post-church, a return to church has been quite difficult, because we found lots of people simply gave up church or lost the habit of church. And so often congregations are about a third less than they were when we first went into the pandemic. We found so many of our digital teams are tired and exhausted. And we've kind of played with hybrid church and tried to find out what might we do. But what we didn't really do is to kind of say, actually, we found a new group of people here who are natively digital, who live in the digital space. One of the findings we found in our own YouGov poll, kind of looking at an online panel, was when we said, do you connect with online worship or organized religion online? Up to 34% of people said they did, and if you go to young people, it's up to 50%. And that's really interesting, because that blows apart the idea that people won't engage with online worship. They were engaging, and they were kind of saying they would even more. If you've got to say, where are the massi of today? Where are the people groups who don't connect with religion? They're online. They're in the digital space. They're connecting with the church through digitality first. Barna have also found this in their own work, that more and more people through the lockdown began to turn to online space for their primary engagement with religion. So that was across all the groups, baby boomers, baby busters, millennials, Gen Z, Gen Y, and so on. All of these people, all the people group, increasingly as you get younger, are going first and foremost to the internet to find out where Christianity, what Christianity is all about. This is the new place. This is the culture that we need to reach. And the church is kind of crazy if it doesn't kind of go there and see what's going on and engage in this strange new place, this strange new land. But that's actually a big question there, because what would Jesus do in this place? What does it mean for us to preach the good news, or to share the good news in this strange new world? These interesting pictures here, drawn from a number of places. It used to be a Christ We Share collection of postcards with some of these pictures of Jesus in. Jesus who is in a different culture, enculturated within that culture, made to be part of that culture, identified as one of that culture. And that's really interesting. It's kind of not just leaving us to share a white Western Jesus, blonde hair, blue eyed kind of Jesus with the rest of the world, but actually making Jesus known within the culture which people find themselves in, incarnating Jesus into that culture, into that presence. What would that mean? One of the things that Vincent Donovan did was to query whether worship in a Maasai culture could be the same as in a European culture. And so he began to kind of bring in different forms of maize bread, different drink into the communion service. He began to change the models of how you do worship. What happened after Donovan left, though, was that the Maasai decided that they wanted to have something which is more identifiably Christian, that yes, they could cope with what had happened and what Donovan had done, but they wanted actually to announce their new identity in new ways. And so they wanted to go back to a more focused liturgy and a more kind of traditional liturgy in what they were doing. And that's really interesting, because what Maasai culture did was to take hold of Christianity and embrace it into such a way that it began to change their own culture. That's different from saying, in order to be a Christian, you've got to be a white Western European first of all. We allow people to actually identify with their own culture and develop their own way of being, their own way of living. You can read a lot of this, of course, in the key textbooks. Books like Walter Brueggemann's Biblical Perspectives on Evangelism, Living in a Three-Storied Universe, and in lots of other stuff that Walter's written, looking at the way in which that he talks in Three Storied Universe of the way in which history, that the church's core role is to tell God's story, to give the story of God's self, to say this is actually God, this is who we believe in, this is what he's told us, this is how he's patterned our lives through the liturgical calendar of Easter and harvest and Christmas and so on, but through all the other celebrations as well. And that in a way that patterns the people's engagement with what God is about. So the church's core role is to tell God's story, to tell people about God, to introduce people to God, and then for worship to be, as we'll see in a minute, God's dating agency, the kind of time when we give a focus time to God. And of course, God has said where we draw near to him, he will draw near to us. That sense of encountering God through worship, through practice. Stanley House, of course, and William the Presbyterians pointed out that actually Christian society is supposed to be different. It's supposed to stand out away from what we always do, and to say that there is something different about us. Gilbert Belazakian in Community 101 says the same. Richard Borkham in The Bible and Mission. Different ways in which people have kind of opened up this opportunity of what mission is all about. Wesley, of course, made the point that we don't just want to go for converts, but we want to go for disciples. How do we engage with people in such a way that they don't just say, yeah, we want to follow Jesus, but actually they want to follow Jesus day by day, following him more closely, more nearly. The great prayer of Richard of Chichester. That sense that our whole lives are devoted to this sense of engaging more closely with God. I said I was going to show you kind of thing from Dave Adamson from his book Metachurch, which came out earlier on this year. And Dave kind of built up this amazing diagram in which he talks about physical and digital strands of church engagement. And you'll notice there's different kind of physical entry. He talks about attending a church event for physical, attending a church service, and then moving through to the green area, which we'll talk about in a minute. And slightly different for digital, and you've got social media and online stuff, but then also a website or a podcast. But the yellow section is worship. And there, Dave Adamson talks this about being God's dating agency. This is where God connects with people. People come and worship, and through worship, they engage with God and engage with God's self, hear more about God's self, and so on. But then Dave Adamson talks about the green area being the place actually of discipleship training. That's where we kind of connect with what God's about and how we learn to be more and more like him. So kind of the yellow is the core bit. That's where we connect with God. That's where we learn about him in the first place. But then we grow deeper and deeper from conversion to discipleship through these various in-person small groups, Zoom groups, city groups, sharing, giving and serving and so on. So lots of really interesting things that are going on here. That mission isn't just going around shouting at people and getting them to convert to Christianity. Mission is actually, first of all, inviting people, inviting them into engaging with the church by going out to them and helping them here, but then actually through worship and then through discipleship activities as well. So what then does Daniel do? Well, Daniel in Babylon kind of reminds us that things have got to be done differently if you want to get on. First of all, Daniel reminds us to be faithful to our faith, that actually we don't need to throw our faith out the window. We actually need to strengthen our faith more and more and be authentically Christian, authentically faithful in what we're trying to do. Indeed, he says, don't assimilate to the host culture. So actually stand out and say, actually, I won't do that because of what God is telling me to do. I've got to be true to what God is saying for me to live my life. So there are things I won't do. There are things I will do. There are things that I will assimilate, but there are things that I will actually keep hold of. Let your faith identity show awesome how God is. I do wonder sometimes whether people kind of look at Christians and think, nah, that's all right. Or do they look at Christians and say, yes, that's the kind of life I want? I remember when I first became a Christian, it's because other people at my school witnessed to the love of Christ, showed the love of Christ in their lives, accepted me into a friendship group and so on. And I kind of began to think, well, what's that all about? What have they got that I haven't got? Do I get it? Is that the way that we're projecting ourselves as well, that we have a gift that we can give to others? Fourthly, God is with you at all times, even in the furnace, even beside the rivers of Babylon. That we need to hold on to a faith where God is with us through the thick and the thin of our contemporary existence. How do we sing your songs here, Lord? Well, we sing them regardless of whether that's possible or not. We continue to sing God's songs. We resist the worship of culture, which indeed may lead to persecution. But instead of kind of bowing down to culture and saying, yeah, we'll take it all on board, we resist it and stand up for what God is asking us to do. And that might mean changes in diet, in cultural interpretation, that will also give growth to our daily discipleship, being faithful to our faith. That's really interesting that we see in Daniel's experience in Babylon a kind of precursor to our own experience here in the digital world, within digital culture. Of course, all this is summed up in Micah 6:8, that great verse. What God demanded of you? To act justly, to love mercy, to love loving, and to humbly walk with your God. To humbly walk with your God. This sense of continuous engagement with God, continuous patterning with what God's all about. The Pope, of course, has said this very clearly a number of times. One of the things he says, it's not technology which determines whether or not communication is authentic or culture is authentic, but rather human heart and our capacity to use wisely the means at our disposal. Doing mission in the digital world isn't simply saying everything that I do has to be patterned, has to be focused upon doing things in the way that Google would want me to do them, or Facebook would want, or Meta would want me to do them. It's not about bowing down to the gods of digital. Instead, it's actually being embedded within that culture in such a way that I maintain my Christian message, my Christian identity. It's about actually having a heart for the people who are there, a heart for God as well, and representing God in that world, in that place. Going back right to the start of what I was trying to say today, evangelism is the process of bringing the gospel to people where they are, not where you'd like them to be. We might want people to gather into our churches to find God, to find out where he is. But actually, it's the process of bringing the gospel to people where they are within digital culture, engaging through Facebook, engaging through perhaps augmented reality, engaging through TikTok, engaging through social media, then actually encouraging them to be part of a new community which is formed there. When the gospel reaches people where they are, their response to the gospel is the church in a new place. What would it mean for us then to develop church in a new place? Well, as Daniel did, as Vincent Donovan did. Is there a new way of us singing the Lord's song in a strange land, because actually that land has become less strange because we've engaged with it? But that's really what I wanted to kind of say today, to talk about digitality, the digital revolution, and how we might tie that in with our imperative to do mission.